Welcome to ATTRA, Voices from the Field. This sustainable agriculture podcast is presented by the National Center for Appropriate Technology with support from USDA Rural Business Cooperative.
So thank you, Bren, for being with us on ATTRA's Voices from the Field podcast. I'm really pleased that Bren Smith joins us as he's the executive director of Greenwave. And I'm just going to let you, Bren, just kind of start off telling us a little bit about you. Give a short intro of who Bren Smith is and why it is that you do the things you do.
Sure, it's an honor to be on. Thanks so much for inviting me. As you said, I'm executive director of Greenwave. We're a nonprofit that's trying to train a new generation of ocean farmers. I'm a regular guy. I mean, I was a high school dropout, headed out to become a commercial fisherman when I was 14, fished the globe, and over the years of just trying to figure out how do we farm the ocean in a sustainable way, how do we fish the ocean in a sustainable way, ended up with something that I call 3D ocean farming. And really what that is polyculture in the ocean. And so we take small areas of ocean and grow a whole mix of species. We grow seaweeds and shellfish, kelp, gracilaria, mussels, scallops, oysters, and use those to not only feed local communities, but to restore our seas and help fight climate change. So we soak up carbon, we soak up nitrogen, we rebuild reef systems. And we really think of it as polyculture that's restorative, both building local economies while breathing life back into the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's just a mouthful too, because you touched on some of the elements, and some of the ecological, problems that you might be addressing or whatever, but what is it that got you into this? What did you notice? What was the impetus for you getting into this line of work? What is the importance to you of this whole idea of ecological fisheries management?
Yeah, so I look back on my life, and it's sort of an arc of ecological redemption, because when I was in the Bering Sea fishing for cod and crab, it was just the height of industrialized fishing. So we were tearing up entire ecosystems with our trawls, chasing fewer and fewer fish further and further out to sea. And most of the fish I was catching was going to McDonald's for the fish sandwich. So as a kid, I loved my job, but it was some of the most unsustainable food production on the planet, producing some of the unhealthiest food on the planet. And then the cod stocks crashed while I was out in the Bering Sea, and that was a wake-up call for a whole generation of us that wanted to spend our life working at sea, but if with the decline of the fishery, that wasn't going to be possible. So I went to the salmon farms in northern Canada, because that was supposed to be the answer. Right? Aquaculture was supposed to reduce pressure on fish stocks and feed the planet, create jobs. But instead, it was really more of the same. And looking back, I see that as essentially growing neither fish nor food. It was Iowa pig farms at sea. So I left that kind of disillusioned and kept searching, and ended up in Long Island Sound and began as an oysterman, and then evolved from there.
Well, I think one of the things that's exciting about your journey, is the whole idea of ecological redemption, and it's not merely trying to answer questions of, how do we take better care of the planet? But I think you've got a holistic look. That's kind of what I was getting. You're talking about people. You worked with the fishermen. You were the fishermen. You worked with the people at the canneries or so this whole lifestyle, this whole economy that's been developed over eons on the coast. Might be in some bit of turmoil. Can you speak to that a little bit, and perhaps how, this type of ecological approach can address the whole system?
Yeah, it is stunning to see hundreds of years of culture and local economy, built up, destroyed overnight because of ecological collapse. And that's what happened in the cod fishery in Newfoundland, and then up and down the East Coast. Thousands of boats beached, canneries emptied, and it's just heartbreaking because these aren't just jobs. It's not just making money. There's a certain professions, whether it's, I think, coal mining, I think steel workers are this way, farmers, I'm sure, that just, it comes with an entire identity. And the way I think of it is, there's certain professions that we want to keep as we move forward into this new economy that we can sing songs about, like the pride of feeding the country, building the country, powering the country. Like that's really meaningful stuff. And so this isn't just for us out in the ocean. It's not just about job creation, not just about growing food, but really, keeping that pride and identity, cultural identity that I've had since I've been a kid. I think all of that in my life I've seen, under threat, and people, employment continuing to rise, less and less fish out there. And so we just really need to pivot and figure out a completely new strategy, not only like how to be stewards of the seas, but how do you build a new kind of economy that serves people, serves the planet, and just not a set of short-term interests.
Yeah, and that makes me think of something, that I heard you say one time. It's like, you're talking about a new paradigm. It's building an economy that is completely different from the industrialized economy that we have. That's what we're used to. How do people respond to you? I mean, how do the fisher folk out there, who have been doing this for generation after generation, how are they responding? How are the aquaculturists, responding to this message?
Sure. I mean, first of all, if there's one thing we do at Greenwave is to look at all the mistakes made by industrial aquaculture and all the mistakes made by industrial agriculture and try not to make them again. I mean, our motto in a way is like, how do we do food right? How do we do agriculture right? The beautiful thing about the oceans right now is they're essentially a blank slate. And so we have this opportunity to build an economic and food system from the bottom up where we weave these key principles of economic justice, of access, of, polyculture, not monoculture, of giving low-income people access to leases, all these things. We can weave that into the DNA of this new ocean industry, and that's really exciting. And I think we have all this momentum. We have requests to start farms in every coastal state in North America and 20 countries around the world. We're just a small group of people here, but there's this tsunami of interest. What we did right from the start, everybody wanted me to, patent or put IP on the farming model we developed. And I said, no, that's a tool of the old economy. And what we need to do is open source this and build a farm that anybody can farm and sort of be a nail salon model of the sea. So we structured it so anybody with 20 acres and a boat, $20,000 can start their own farm, be up and farming the first year. And that minimal capital requirement is the key to replication. And so we have, 11th generation fishermen, 3rd generation lobstermen. I've got indigenous tribal folks, and I have a whole new generation of young land-based farmers who want to start farms, can't afford land, can't afford all the capital required to start up on land, coming to us because it's cheap and easy to build. Right? And the opportunity for them, I think, it just was surprising to me that there would be so much interest on the land-based side, but it's because it's that sort of low barrier to entry that's it's been the secret. So the response has been, so the fishermen when we first started were skeptical. We're not going to grow vegetables, and quite honestly, I miss chasing fish around the globe. We're like the last commercial hunters out there, and now I'm like a arugula farmer. I can't hang out the same bars I used to. I don't have any high seas stories, and it's a quiet little life, and that's embarrassing. But what we say to fishermen, and cultural training is really key, is we say, listen, we're not going to be able to be hunters of the sea. That's just 1 out of 4 marine species are threatened with extinction, era climate change. 90% of major fish stocks are overexploited. We just can't go in this direction. But what we can do is retain that key part of our identity by becoming restorative ocean farmers. We get to work on the water, We don't have bosses. We succeed on our and fail on our own terms. We have self-directed lives, and we have the pride of helping feed the country. Like, we get to keep that part of our soul, and that's part of our identity that we can still write songs about. So that's a whole discussion we have in our trainings. It turns out to be really important for the strong-willed fishers out there.
Well, I think one of the most compelling things that you said was the identity of the fisherman. It's more than just a job to them. It's a way of life. I mean, there's just something about the repetition of setting gear, maintaining boats, of riding the swells to the fishing grounds. I mean, it's a culture, and and the fact that that throughout this whole process, you've addressed something that is so elemental that gets people right in their chest. You know what I mean? I think that's something that's really compelling, not only for me, but especially for the people on the coast who are looking out to sea, trying to find any way they can to maintain that livelihood. Not only because it's something that they enjoy, it's their lifestyle, but this is how they feed their family.
Exactly.
And we've talked about.
No, go ahead.
No, well, we've talked about how people are responding and such like that, and I think that just goes further into an explanation of exactly what 3D ocean farming is. I mean, you told us a little bit about how it's multitrophic and this and that, but how is Greenwave, in this particular system, how is it addressing some of the ecological problems that we have? And what are some of the things that you're doing for coastal communities in the holistic sense?
Sure. So, I mean, it's hard to tell what we're doing underneath there because, we're underneath the water. And so I would say, imagine an underwater garden, right? And we've got these hurricane-proof anchors on the edges, and then just ropes that go about 8 feet below the surface. And then we just grow our crops from there. We hang our kelp, which grows down from the horizontal ropes. Next to that, we've got mussels and mussel socks and scallops in our lantern nets. And below all those species, we have oysters in cages, and then clams down in the mud. The whole idea is how many different things can we grow in 20 acres using a 3D model. The benefit of growing this way is one, really small footprint because we're using the entire water column. My farm used to be 100 acres. It's down to 20. I'm growing way more food than before. Anybody can boat and fish and swim on our farm, so it has a really low aesthetic impact, and that's really important. So it protects the oceans as commons, creates this community space where people come and swim through our kelp forests and kayak and fish. And having a low aesthetic impact, everybody thinks aquaculture and they see salmon pens. It's a big industrial model. We're the exact opposite. The other key here is we only grow things that are zero input. So that means no fresh water, no feed, no fertilizer, of course, no land. That makes it the most sustainable form of food production on the planet. And everyone asks, like, oh, why will people eat this disgusting stuff called seaweed, shellfish? And we are entering a time of the creation of a new climate economy, and we will be eating more sea plants and bivalves because zero input food is going to be the most affordable food on the planet to grow and eat, right? We're seeing water prices go up, feed, land prices all go up. That gives us an advantage. And luckily, what's going to happen is ocean plants and bivalves aren't going to be just this high-end boutique food, but it's going to be center of the plate. The other piece about the farming model is that we do kelp, we do grass layer, we do these shellfish, but it's just the beginning. There are over 10,000 edible plants in the ocean, a couple hundred kinds of shellfish. Right? Imagine being a chef these days and finding out there were corns, arugulas, spinaches, tomatoes that you've never seen, tasted, or cooked with before. Like, it can be a really exciting moment for as a chef to try to make this new seafood plate with what we call sea greens and bivalves at the center of the plate. And just to go to your other piece, go ahead.
Well, I was just it brought up the question of there's a lot of these species out there that we've just never heard of. I mean, we all eat salmon and shrimp and tilapia. You know, I mean, that's what we know.
Yeah.
You know, as a society. How are you able to take, you know, this unfamiliar food and turn it into something that people are going to want? I mean, I know that's probably a pretty big job, but what are some of the structures that you're putting in place to do that?
Yeah, so I mean, we're lucky in that we're this incredible, enlightenment period of food culture in the U.S. So we work with a whole network of great chefs. What's interesting about sea greens, it took me a long time to figure this out, is that you can't treat it as seafood. This isn't to be wrapped around salmon or put in a seaweed salad. We really want to denutrify it, right? Our thing is, let's make kelp the new kale. So one of the dishes that does really well that we serve all the time in New York City is a barbecue kelp noodles with parsnips and breadcrumbs. Like that's not what you think of in terms of seaweed and seafood. Delicious, sells out every night. We're doing kelp jerkies, bouillon cubes. You know, there's all these things we can make out of the seaweeds, and if as long as we stay on this journey of desutrifying. What's interesting about sea greens is there's an entire Western culinary history of people eating seaweeds. So whether it's the kelp highway up through Peru, where it was eaten regularly, Italian culture ate it, used it in sauces and all sorts of dishes. If you go back 3 generations, Irish, it was a core part of their diet, on and on. And so part of this is about reviving that culinary history because, you know, industrial food really pushed it off the plate.
Well, that's pretty. It's pretty amazing, you know, to dig into, you know, cultural heritage or whatever. And like you said, there's a definitely a local food movement, I think, that is giving this an awful lot of credence, right? There seems to be a market out there for it, for sure. I guess it's just a point of developing an infrastructure, which I understand that you're trying to do as well. Not only with the food side, but on the production side. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing to help farmers get started in this.
Exactly, and this has been a complicated journey because we need to figure. I mean, you know what? The last number I saw, 2012, 91% of land-based farmers lost money, right, that year. Right? We don't have a functional farming economy for the small-scale farmers in the U.S. So we need to do things differently. So we've been just trying to figure out what's the right economic ecosystem, the right staging to create a foundation where farmers can really succeed. So we created 2 entities. One is a nonprofit, that's Greenwave, and the other is a for-profit called Sea Green Farms. And the nonprofit Greenwave does 3 things. It does the training and education in order to get people up and going. It does the policy. We've got a campaign we're going to roll out called Legalize the Other Weed because you're not allowed to grow seaweeds in most states. So we do that policy work, and then third we do R&D. Lower energy efficiencies, the hatcheries, mobile hatcheries, solar powered boats, things like that. And then the for-profit does that capital-intensive stuff that happens on land. It does seafood hubs, it does hatcheries, and it does market development. And what's key about the for-profit side is it buys everything our farmers to grow. So if you're a farmer who comes through a Greenwave training program, you get 2 years of support, like direct consulting. We help you with permits. You get free seed. You get winter gear from Patagonia. And we agree to buy 80%. We connect you with the for-profit, which agrees to buy 80% of whatever you grow at triple the market rate. So that allows our farmers they don't have to worry about where to sell this weird stuff. Sea Green Farms can do that. So that mix has been key of what's for-profit, what's non-profit, how do you launch this new generation and ensure they're successful.
Well, it's really a pretty amazing model, and you said that you've got people all over the world who are interested in this. I mean, how are you meeting this demand?
Yeah, we're a small organization at this point. I mean, Greenwave's only been around under 2 years. We've got 10 farms up and running. This year we'll be at 25. Next year we have our first 2 farms we're supporting in California, and we're about to begin open an office in Europe. So we're expanding. What scale looks like to us is, what does this look like if it's all over the globe? I think of them as Greenwave reefs. So 25 to 50 farms regionally, small-scale farms. You surround them in conservation zones. Then you have a seafood hub and a hatchery based in a struggling community. Then a ring of institutional buyers, the Googles that we work with, the Patagonias, and entrepreneurs doing value-added products like the kelp jerkies and the fertilizers and the animal feed, things like that. And then you take that Greenwave reef and you replicate it up and down the coast and around the globe. And that's how you get to networked scale. That's where you actually create jobs, the communities benefit, you're producing incredible amount, huge amount of food, but it doesn't look like 1,000, it doesn't look like, huge banana plantations out in the ocean. It's a completely different model.
Well, it's a completely different model. I mean, it's based upon the small scale ideal and what I would call true democratic action and entrepreneurialism, right? I mean, because you've got people in all walks of. You think about food, how it impacts all of our lives, from production to processing to marketing to culinary arts, everything, right? And so you've got each one of these actors, and I think that's one of the really cool things about it. And another thing I like is just with respect to the farms themselves, they're so low impact. A picture of your farm, you'll see a couple of buoys, right? That's it.
Exactly. I call it the worst eco tour in the country. You come out, pay $500 for a tour, and there's nothing to see. Right?
Exactly.
But the other thing is that 2 other points. One is, the goal we have to in the era of climate change move beyond sustainability and actually into restoration. If we were to set aside our entire oceans as marine parks, they were still going to die because of acidification, water temp increases, and climate change in general. What we need to do is have these small-scale farmers breathing life back into our oceans. I mean, the New Yorker called our farm the culinary equivalent of the electric car, because we're soaking up 5 times more carbon than land-based plants. We're filtering literally millions of gallons of water a day, pulling nitrogen out of the water column. We're rebuilding reefs. And the potential is huge. A World Bank study came out, and if you were to take 5% of U.S. territorial waters, turn them into this type of ocean farm, you could create enough protein equivalent to 69 trillion hamburgers. You could soak up the carbon output of 20 million cars in the U.S., and you could create over 50 million direct jobs. I mean, the scale here is just absolutely stunning.
It is. It's amazing, it's amazing, and it completely impacts in a cross section of our footprint on the water and on the land, and that's what I find it real compelling. We've got just a few minutes left, Brent, but so as we move forward here, the question on our mind is, how do interested people get involved in this? How do they get in touch with you? What's the first thing they need to know?
Yeah, so if you come to greenwave.org, we've got a place where you can sign up for our farmer training program. You can sign up to volunteer. We take fellows. In the future, we're hoping to do things like create community gardens where people can go out, learn about ocean farming, be introduced to it. I think there are a lot of ways people can engage, but greenwave.org is definitely the place to start.
Very good. And, with that, we'll have to terminate a conversation that I could just go on forever with you, for sure, Bren. I really appreciate you coming on board. Maybe we can have you back again sometime because, again, there's so much here, and it is a production system, a full system, I think, that's got an awful lot of promise, and I salute you and people like you for taking this type of thing on. Thank you, Bren. I really appreciate talking to you today.
Thanks so much for having us on. It was great.
You bet. You
Bye-bye.
bet.
You can find other episodes of ATTRA, Voices from the Field, along with ATTRA's other sustainable agriculture resources at www.attra.ncat.org. That's www.attra.ncat.org.